They come.
Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're going to wait a few minutes to start just as people start logging in, but if you'd like, you can start submitting some of your questions into the Q&A section of Zoom. All right, everyone, I'm gonna go ahead and kick things off. I know we still have a lot of people joining us and logging in, so welcome everyone. My name is Brianna Jacobs. I'm the organizer of the Social Media Strategy Summit. If you haven't heard of our conference before, we've been running this event for about or over 10 years now. So we have events in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York around social media strategies for marketing executives. And so I just wanted, this is our first Ask Us Anything webinar series. I mean, it's, obviously don't have to say it again, but we're all, going through a challenging time right now. And it's been encouraging for me just to see all of the great support just within the marketing community. And I wanted to be able to create a space for all of you just to create, open and candid dialogue, be able to share our, situations and what we're dealing with at the moment, and kind of talk about the ways and opportunities to be of service to our customers right now. So we have four awesome panelists here. I'll just go over quickly the format of the panel. I just want to change the slide really quick. Yeah, so I left the chat open, so feel free to leave comments, or if there's any technical questions that you have, please direct those into the chat. And for questions that you want to submit, please add them to the Q&A box, and Melinda, our moderator, will be taking your questions. So any context that you're able to give with your question, what type of company you're working for, your industry, anything specific to your situation, just so that our speakers can sort of suggest the best possible frameworks and advice and guidance for all of you. And of course, also hashtag SMSsummit if you want to share any of the learnings or just ask me any other questions. I'll be monitoring that online as well. So without further ado, I'll welcome our panelists. We have Melinda Byerly of Timeshare CMO. She's has so graciously agreed to help moderate this panel and take questions. We have Jim Tobin of Carousel, an influencer marketing agency, and also Ignite Social Media. Pam Didner, she's a B2B consultant and author. and Tech Ross of Synchrony. So they also all have really diverse and great backgrounds, and can sort of share how, you know, they've started helping themselves and their teams, you know, move forward, you know, during this time. So they have some great tips to share with you guys, and are excited to take your questions. So Melinda, I will pass it to you. Let you take it away.
Thank you, Brianna, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm Melinda Byerly. I'm the founding partner of Timeshare CMO. We're a strategic digital marketing consultancy based here in San Francisco. I've been working in digital marketing for almost 20 years now. That's my specialty, particularly analytics and attribution. But I'll be moderating this group of experts, so I'm really excited to have all three of them here. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and to take about 60 seconds each to tell us where you're located and about your area of expertise. And for the audience, if you could please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It's just to the left of the chat button. And if you could put your questions there, those are the ones we're going to use. Unless you want to hear my prepared list of questions, it's best for you to put yours in there, and we'd like to be here to answer your questions. So Pam, since you're off mute, I'll let you go first.
All right. Hi, everyone. And Pam Binder here. I'm actually a B2B marketing consultant through and through. And as you can tell, I'm wearing boring top. And my specialty is actually content marketing, account-based marketing, and also enabling sales as a marketer, which is a sales enablement. So quick and short.
Thanks, Pam. Tuck, would you go next, please?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Tuck Ross. I'm currently at Care Credit of Synchrony, previous experience at Disney, Hasbro, Guitar Center, and other consumer-focused brands, especially e-commerce. Grew up in digital and have a high focus on the consumer, which I absolutely believe is the hero and who we're looking to support as we go through these strange and interesting times.
And Jim, with the fabulous background.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Jim Tobin. I founded a company in 2007 called Ignite Social Media. So the first social media marketing agency created in the United States. And then we created another company for influencer marketing that launched in 2015 called Carousel. I've also written a couple books on social media marketing, which, as it turns out, is a really dumb thing to do because social media changes faster than book publishing does. So I will not have a third.
Well, with that, Jim, the first question that we have from the audience is about social media. So I'm going to ask you to dive into this one, and Tuck, you might also have some feedback. Here's the question. Due to COVID-19, what do you think is the best way to transition a social strategy to be supportive, yet still provide education around products and services?
It really depends on, that's why if you ask questions, the context would be really helpful, because, you know, we work with large retailers, small consultants, technology companies. It really varies depending on what you have to offer. I think, you know, I see some ads in my news feed for clothes, you know, that you can buy e-commerce. They don't really have to change anything. And then other retailers where they're open still, they sell essential products. You know, there's a lot of dialogue back and forth. Is it safe to be there? Are they doing enough for their employees? Some products like Zoom, for example, are really, really helpful during something like this. Other products really don't have anything to do with it. So I think it varies very much depending on, you know, your orientation as a company, as a product, as what you've done before in the past. One thing we are doing that I think is a tip everyone can take away is every morning we review every single client and we look at the posts they have going up that day. We look at the media they have planned for that day, and we look at the comments that they got overnight. And we look to see if anything needs to be adjusted. And one thing is, don't do that by yourself, because depending on how much news you're consuming, what you're reading, you may end up being a little too conservative. You may end up being a little too aggressive. And so we find if there's 3 or 4 people who can bounce that off, can we say this? Can we say that? That you tend to end up with the right sort of you know, balance between conservative and aggressive.
Tuck.
Yeah, Jim, you've got some good points. I think, you know, one thing that's super exciting about this time is that we're all at home, and we know that there's one baseline factor is that we're spending a lot more time online. And so I think this is actually a really good time that businesses can be thinking about social, right? Like, look at what you're doing. Maybe it's not pulling back, but maybe it's shifting how your content strategy, your content marketing, and the messaging that goes around that, being like, hey, stuck at home, want to learn something? I think there's no better time for pushing education around products, services, helping people understand how to react in this environment. because again, not knowing necessarily what category this is for, I think the fact that we all have this capability to do exactly what we're doing here. Maybe you're running a webinar about your product or service. Maybe you're helping people understand that have your product and service, how to use it better to better integrate them into extra features, or even just deepening them in the product use, which ultimately creates lock-in over time. One, just for the use of the product, but two, because you're giving them something that for free is on the surface, but actually helping them evolve their capabilities themselves, right? So I think it's actually a really good time overall for education, because we have the time to learn. You see a lot of those comments out there about starting your side hustle, getting your thing going, because people have more time to sort of catch up on their to-do list. It's a really good time to not only for B2B, but also B2C in these areas, to spend more time helping evolve whoever your consumer is in what you do.
Melinda, can I actually ask one comment? And this is actually from processes perspective. I like Jim's ideas in terms of reviewing the social comments the night before, and also review the media planning, actually what you're going to post today. And I think that's a great idea. But from processes perspective, I'm on the client side actually for 20 years. And one thing that we do in a situation like this is we actually have a daily huddle. And it's kind of like you operate like a newsroom, if you will. And of course, the agency can do that for you. And they do a fantastic job if you have actually a great relationship with them. They understand your product very, very well. But if you are doing a lot of stuff on your own, and then you have an agency or subcontractors working, working with you, is actually have a daily huddle and just talk it through in terms of what needs to be pushed out and what other things needs to be changed. I loved Jim's ideas in terms of like having multiple people talk about it, and having a daily huddle as your established process can keep things moving forward.
That's a good practice for social media, even in a time not of COVID-19. So it's good.
I 100% agree with you.
Good marketing is timeless.
Yeah.
So we have several questions that are around the same idea, and it's something that we actually discussed in the pre-call. I'm going to read some of these, but I'm going to synthesize it for you. And they have to do with questions about whether we even can or should market at this time. So examples of questions from the audience are, do you feel pushing ads through influencer marketing could be seen as insensitive? What is the best way to convince brands this is a good time to promote your products while developing community in the home? How do we tastefully and sensitively post about products that are not free, or should that be avoided? We have a higher education specialist from Alabama A&M. What should we post with no messaging from our admin or activities on campus? Someone else asked, how do we get our executives to understand that if this is a good time to be, or that we should be doing something? So I think the way we've talked about this is that some people are still stuck. They're still like, should we even be marketing right now? So it's a broad question, but I want to open that up. And Tuck, I would like you to start with the answer to that question, because I think there is a brand aspect of this to start with it.
Yeah, you said it. I think the word is brand, and I think it's a lot more brand than sales right now. Of course, depending on category, right? And so I'm actually in healthcare, and it's actually a time that people have that need. So we're very relevant right now in that situation. But there's other spaces. If you look at what Ellen's doing, she's building a Lego set a day, right? Product integration, it's perfect. She's getting, her Blue Apron or a Purple Carrot delivered to her house every day, and she's making a meal, right? So there's ways to integrate it that are natural to what people are doing right now. They're spending more time at home, thinking about if you're relevant in that situation, that's great. If you look at what Adobe did to pivot, Adobe Summit is today. That's typically a largely attended event. They're doing it 100% online with virtual speakers. So you can go check that out after this if you're interested. It's something that, a lot of businesses are thinking about. Again, how do you continue that education about how my product works, what you do with my product? Some of it is very overt. Build a Lego set at home. Some of it's a little, more of how do we shift this so that we do more of these webinar type of events. I think it's changing the messaging for sure. Jim has a good point about we're doing the same thing, triaging every day about what that message looks like. I think it's very appropriate to say, hey, are you stuck at home? Check this out. Obviously not as appropriate to say, hey, are you stuck at home because of COVID-19, right? Because there's some sensitivity to that. And people are going through very real scenarios where they're starting to know people now that are either going through it or, are having more adverse effects to that. So I think it's thinking about how you change your messaging. Land Rover is like, hey, we invented social distancing, and it's got a Land Rover out in the middle of a mountain by itself. Very appropriate. So I think it's thinking about the context of what you're doing and how to develop that message around what's happening. If you're selling, I think it's much more about the branding of that and how you're enabling people during this time.
Jim, what success have your clients had, or how have they tackled sort of resistance in executive ranks? And again, sort of underscoring, I mean, I know that working with large companies is not the same as working in higher ed, but it's the same sort of like resistance that might be coming from the top. And what are your clients doing to be successful there?
Yeah, and one of the things we always fall back on is data. And what we're seeing for clients who are running before the virus and during the virus is a very dramatic improvement in efficiency. We're seeing cost per landing page view for client after client cutting to half of what it was. We're seeing CPM cost drop, cost per click drop. We're seeing very few to no negative comments on those things where we're still running ads. Now we have shut off some ads because we anticipated negative. And for one travel client, we took the same influencer post and we had the influencer change it to, you know, when I'm able to travel again, and then keep the things going. And we saw actually conversion rates higher than they have ever been. And so there is more use of social media right now than ever before. There is less advertising than there was 2 months ago. And when there's more supply and less demand, prices drop. So if it's appropriate for you to buy, and it's not appropriate for every brand, but if it's appropriate for you to buy, it is a buyer's market. This is a really good time to do that.
So Melinda, can I inject one point? And I agree with Jim and also Tuck's point of view in terms of the relevant messagings. But on if you are on the client side and you have a team, and what is the process to go through that messaging, say, changes? And from my perspective is you have to move a little bit upstream. I know that many companies actually have a buyer's persona. Many companies actually have a messaging framework. Many companies has editorial plans, right? These are the 3 templates. A lot of time are sources that guide a lot of creative development and also the social media copywriting. So everything is changing. Then maybe we should go back to the sources, right? Maybe we need to update our buyer's persona. Their pain and challenges are changing right now. Maybe the cost is kind of important to them, right? Maybe to feel very much of emotional connection and finding information is relevant to them. So you have to go back and look at your buyer's persona and make that changes. Then once that's changed, maybe your messaging framework that needs to change. Because if you actually have these 3 documents that updated, then it's easy to drive that alignment within your team and also within your agency. And when you have those information updated, it's easy to have that conversation with your management and said, hey, we need to make changes. Here is my recommendation. So from my perspective, everything Jim and Tuck was talking about, very, very critical. But let's go back to a source. The sources where those things are and make necessary change and align everyone. So, sorry,
I love
back
about
to you,
the
Melinda.
theme. No, it's good. I mean, what I love about this theme is that good marketing is good marketing. The crisis doesn't change that. So being very human and very sort of honest with your audience about what they're doing and trying to meet them where they are. I don't know how many people in the audience are fans of Fleabag, the show that's on Amazon Prime, but there's a very funny scene in the show where one of the characters gets a horrible haircut, a really bad haircut, and it's a very emotional scene. Tuck, it's not about Tuck.
Tuck is like touching.
And it was, they tweeted out this clip of this scene, and it referred to like, maybe now is not a good time to cut your own hair. They didn't say it was Fleabag. There was no call to action. It was just a funny moment that was so, it had acknowledged the moment of where they lived, of where people are. If you didn't know what Fleabag was, that may have just gone right over your head. But if you were a Fleabag fan,
Amazon
like,
Prime.
Yeah, I want to go. I should go watch that again. Like, that was a great show. So it's all about being human. It's all, and remembering that marketing is not just about selling. It's about connecting your organization, whether you're in higher ed or whether you're in B2B or whether you're in events or whatever it is that you do. Marketing is the point where your company meets people. And it's what are people thinking and feeling? That's the theme. And we should be doing that all the time. We shouldn't need a pandemic to do that. So in many ways, we might see some exciting stuff coming as brands come back to that sort of higher purpose.
Yeah,
Jim looks like he wants to jump in.
I do. Thank you. The nice part about this is that With social, the feedback is so immediate that you can try something and you can very quickly take it down, pull it, pull the ad spend, whatever needs to be done if it doesn't work. So obviously I wouldn't be reckless with that, but you can get really quick feedback. We have one client who was running a series of 4 different ads. I keep getting gray with this lighting, but I'm not sick. 4 different ad targets, and we got one comment that said maybe this isn't the time for this ad, and we actually took the ad down, not because the comment was maybe it's not the right time. It was a pretty gentle comment, but we thought about it and we're like, you're right, that target audience, not the right time. These other 3 we can let them run. And so there is the ability in social, unlike print. There's several higher ed people on here. My daughter's a junior in high school. We got stuff as recently as a week ago saying come visit our campus, because that stuff was printed and it was mailed pre-virus. So you can pivot in social in a way you can't in most other media.
In the print.
Yeah, and I'm even seeing, like, I got a Land's End catalog this week, and I noticed that they didn't have crowds of people together. Usually their photographs are all about people like together. Almost
Yeah.
every picture on every page was one model or 2 people. And I thought somebody there is paying very close attention to what's going on. I mean, that's an example of just how to think about how the lens at which you're being viewed, I think, is a critical thing.
Yeah, we've dumped a lot of things that like direct mail's already printed, right? We've actually held those because of that concern. And then, email and social, we're going to, Melinda, to your point, that appearance that things are separate, or much more familial images, right? So like, this is a family. It's cool that families are hanging out right now. So it's a bunch of friends on the couch at a coffee shop. Don't run that, right?
Not so much.
It's a different POV. But back to, I think, the earlier point that you were making, Melinda, and I think Jim, has some great points on too, is that marketing's redefining value right now, right? And I think a lot of what we're delivering to our consumer, again, whether it's B2C or B2B, whoever your consumer is, they're the hero. And how are you supporting them? And translating, I think, what is your brand ethos? I think it's looking at that very deeply and saying, how are we delivering value as an organization? Maybe it's not through selling product right now. Maybe it's around educational product. Maybe it's just being humans and being real and transparent and like, hey, we're struggling through this time just like you guys are. Please be patient with us. Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's trying to solve a bunch of things because they're dealing with the fear of the unknown, especially in their business environment. But, this is the one time where they're also dealing with it in their personal lives in the same way. And I think all of us coming together and a business recognizing that and sharing it and reconverting that value delivery is going to be as crucial right now as anything you're doing in the sales environment.
I want to, and to that end, and I saw Jim was excited to answer this question because there was a couple questions about the line, right? Where is the line? I think it's important to be, this is not gung-ho, full speed ahead. Nobody should interpret any of this conversation in that way, but I like the way this question was framed. How do you guys see lighthearted events such as April Fool's Day being addressed? What is the line? And that kind of went back to the person who was asking about influencer marketing. So Jim, what's the line?
Don't do April Fool's Day stuff. Not from a brand. Not today. Not this year. In fact, we made sure today that we have no brands tomorrow doing any April Fool's stuff. One brand's doing something lighthearted, but unrelated to pranks, unrelated to fake, because it's just too weird right now. And the world is in an April Fool's thing right now. We don't need a brand to.
Things feel unreal enough.
Yeah, they really do.
I might volunteer something as an idea because Jim, you're absolutely right. It seems way inappropriate, and Google canceled their annual prank, which is sort of like, one of the biggest news items of the last week, besides them donating $800 million to, help fight everything that's going on. But I think, it also depends on the platform. If you look at what's happening, especially on TikTok, people are looking for escape, and they're getting so much negative in the news that brands can help deliver some positive. Maybe it's not specifically around April Fools, but, people delivering a Corona, to people and having a Corona challenge to drink a Corona, right, is somewhat amusing, right? And there's some things that I think brands can do, especially on, a Snapchat or a TikTok, that may feel like it's appropriate because of the type of environment it is, right? Where there's some more creativity. People are looking for an escape in that more entertainment environment. Again, consider it carefully, but I think there is some room for that. And that's maybe even where some influencers come into play.
It almost seems like advanced calculus, right? It's like, this is the advanced calculus of social media. Like, there are going to be people who do it and get away with it, but you better know what you're doing or have a pretty good idea of your audience.
Yeah, I think it's Elf Cosmetics has something on TikTok where they had a TikTok challenge going a couple months ago. They actually rewrote it to be about washing your hands now, and they
Absolutely.
re-released it with some big influencers. I looked at it right before launch. There were 3,000 videos made of it. There were 3.7 million views of those videos. It was fun. It was lighthearted. It was on a platform designed for entertainment like TikTok. It wasn't on LinkedIn.
Right.
So you can definitely get it right. But I think if you start going down the April Fool's line, you're on the wrong track.
It's definitely not a broad approach to your point, Jim.
It's
Absolutely.
edgy. Yeah, it's edgy. And so it's all about risk and reward. How much risk do you want to take? If your company is not an edgy company, might be good to sit this one out. So so with that, I'll go on. There's two questions. They're in two different industries, but they're asking the same question. One is asking from a healthcare company, and the other one is asking from an essential business still working, which is construction. And I think they're asking very similar questions, which is, we're open right now. Like, it may not be obvious, but we are.
You mean the dental clinic?
The healthcare yeah, and then there's also,
okay.
it says healthcare company dental. That is open for emergency. How do we manage our reputation and messaging going out when people think everything but hospitals and grocery stores should be closed? This is very similar to the question that's being asked by a person in construction who says, hey, we're still working. We're considered an essential business. We see it as a double-edged sword. It's good that we're able to keep people at work, but other people are sitting at home and they've been afraid to post since the state's shelter-in-place order. So think if you are an essential business, but let's say you're not a grocery store, or you're not a restaurant that's getting, all this press, for sort of like doing clever things, how might you use social media and marketing at this time? And Tuck, since you raised your hand on healthcare, I'll start with you, and then Pam, everybody will get a chance, because there's good stuff here.
Yeah, obviously Care Credit has a huge network of dentists. Almost every dentist in America takes Care Credit, which is exciting. This is an interesting time, and I think it's a really good time, as a business, no matter who you are, to communicate outward, hey, we're open, right? And figuring out many ways you could do that, whether it's on your website, whether it's on your social. I think people appreciate that because they know local businesses are struggling, and there's some modifications to that, right? Like they're doing contactless curbside pickup. They're doing, vet checks at cars. For a dentist, if you're open for emergency services, great, communicate that, because people still need that type of thing. We were joking about haircuts earlier. Maybe that's not the one you want to be open for. But I think, more emergency and more critical services, you want to be able to communicate that. And I think it's also balancing it with what your message is. Some of the dentists I'm seeing are saying, hey, we're donating a portion of our masks because we don't need them because we're not open, and we're going to give this back to the community. That's a great message to tandem with, we're open during these hours for you. We may have shorter hours, but it's to serve you in the case that you have this need.
Pam, would you like to go next?
Yeah, and very quickly, so about 2 weeks ago, when the restaurants were still open, and I still went out to eat just to support the local restaurants. And what I have noticed that multiple restaurants, they do things differently. There were several restaurants, the waiters will come to me and basically explain to me there are cautionary procedures that they are taking. And for example, the menu I touch, once I touch one time, they will bring out in the kitchen and clean it with sanitizer. And also they say, you know what, when you want to check out, pay your bill, instead of additional interaction between us, can you just use the tablets on the desk and pay, and we'll wipe it out again after you are done. So from my perspective, like if you are actually essential business still open, it's very, very important to explain to people what are some of the procedures that you are taking to mitigate risks, right? And that you can communicate with the people who walk in to your door, and you can also communicate using social media. Maybe you have a doctor, maybe you have a nurse, maybe you have a receptionist, do a quick recording using Loom or even using Zoom for that matter. And then just post it on social media and say, hey, we understand and we want to protect ourselves and also you. These are the couple of things, and we practice religiously. And then just share with them. and let them know that you are taking this seriously, and you try to protect them as well as yourself. And the grocery store I went to, New Seasons, after they implemented the social distancing and also 6 feet, so they put the stickers literally on the floor, right, for the line that you have to stand. There's a little sticker, a little circle, you stand there, and then 6 feet away, there's another circle. So they put circles on the floor to give you a direction and let you know that they are taking this seriously without even talking to you. So there are ways to show it. And the things at this time is communication, like Jim and also Tak were talking about, right? And then communicate with them what you are doing to protect them. So, and by the way, I am typing. That's because there are some questions. If we didn't get to it, I'm just taking proactive measure to actually answer them. So if I'm typing and looking, forgive me, I'm answering people's question. So sorry.
Thank you, Pam.
So just
Jim?
real quick on the construction company, the one thing I'd ask about, I'd suggest about them is, what if they don't post? You know, some people will not understand. You understand if I break a crown, I need to go see somebody, I could be in pain. You may not understand why, you know, Karen needs her wall built, you know, right now. And so, you know, what happens if you don't post? You know, do you rely on that for new business? Well, maybe you do some dark posts and you test them with small dollar amounts, make sure this response isn't negative, make sure, you know, you're ready to answer the obvious questions like, is this safe today in today's environment? What, you know, to Pam's point, what mechanisms are you taking to make sure if you come to my house to build something, I'm safe?
Yep.
But the other question that businesses can ask themselves is, maybe I don't have to post just because I was posting twice a week before. You don't everyone doesn't have to post. It's one option.
And I think, yeah, back to, again, boy, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Marketing is also about communication. And so a simple, marketing and advertising are not the same thing. So it's worth just sort of underlining what we all know is that advertising and marketing aren't always the same. And so it's okay to say you are open for business. It is okay to tell the truth about what is happening to you or your business and express that to the people that want to hear it. And I think that gets us into kind of a couple of questions. I think these are interesting sort of line questions, and there's a lot of questions about events and sort of future. So we're coming to that, those of you who've been asking. So kind of in this line, I want to roll up some questions about, like, you know, like one company is a mortgage company and they're still prospering. You know, people are refinancing their mortgages. Interest rates, you know, the Fed funds rate is now effectively 0. So they want to know how hard they can push. And along those lines, I think this is kind of back to sort of like, where is the line? What if the company is doing great stuff? So let's say they've been donating to the cause or creating parts for ventilators. When does that become braggadocious or sort of like self-promoting versus, where is that line between communicating about what you're doing and being honest and transparent? When does that line tip into like opportunistic? I'm going to call on Jim just because his mic is off.
I'll start with
the
mortgage company, and I think the mortgage company should go full bore for a couple reasons. I would be very sensitive as to the messaging of the ad, but I would probably double or triple my ad budget because unless you don't know how to do math, you refinance a mortgage because it saves you money over time, and interest rates are low. You are genuinely helping people by prospering. So, you know, when interest rates were 5 and 6, you know, you're probably having to do some selling. Now you really have to get people aware that there's an opportunity to save money. That's something that will benefit them right now, particularly if the unemployment rate hits the numbers that we're talking, that potentially we could see coming out of this. You know, having your cash flow minimized is a real benefit. So I would watch my messaging, but I would double, triple, quadruple down on my ad budget.
Yep. Agree with Jim.
You're on mute, Melinda, and I can't remember what the other question was.
It's Zoom bingo. I win. Like, I'm on mute. Zoom bingo. That's one of the things I've seen. I want to talk a little bit about events because there's a lot of questions about events. And of course, our dear friend Brianna is of course, one of the people we know that has been adversely affected by all of this. And so I'm going to roll up some of the questions here so that everybody in the audience can hear them, so the panelists can hear them. A nonprofit, we have had to postpone cancel many of our large fundraising events this spring. Our community specifically is impacted by COVID because they have a rare underlying disease, polycystic kidney disease. They're very stressed about their health and finances. What is your advice to continue fundraising messaging when your community is struggling with other huge issues more than the average consumer? I'm going to pull that apart separately because I think it's a special case, and then we'll talk about events in general. Who's got their mic open? Pam, your mic was open, so you get to go first.
Yeah, this is actually a very tough time if you are in a charity in terms of, hey, everybody's suffering, should I ask for donation or whatnot? There is one charity in Seattle called Upaya, U-P-A-Y-A, and check it out. They were forced to cancel their annual dinner gala because of this event, because of this pandemic. And what they did is they did a virtual event. And so they obviously have auction at that part of the event, and they do actually a virtual auction, which is the host and the hostess, and also all the staff. They still dressed up in black tie and also evening gown. And they record the video, and they also did a live stream, basically to show people like the auction item. So they all dressed up like Vanna White. No, I'm kidding. But you know what I'm talking about, right? And they all showcase the auction one by one. They do that actually live, so people can still make contribution if necessary. At the same time, they have their staff, because it's a virtual event got canceled. They also have their staff dress black tie and also dresses, home deliver the dinner. Home deliver very formally, you know, to the guests' houses. And so there are ways to do it, and it depends on what you want to do. And on top of it, another thing that they do is they call it flash a fundraiser, which is communicate with the network of the donors. Why still is come back to messaging. Why is still important to donate, right? And granted, with this pandemic, there are some other causes still need help, but you need to say it in a way that's relevant to them, right? It comes back to messaging, comes back to copy, right? So, and they still make an effort to do that. But again, you know, be very sensitive about it. And again, it comes back to the words and the writings that we do. So it's just a couple of things that they call it, like, you know, the virtual dinner gala. They call it dinner with a twist. They call it virtual auction. But literally, you know, they still make people feel that this is a gala. That's because all their staff, they all dressed up when they showcase the prices, when they talk to the audiences, even though when all of them were actually at home. So that's just some thought I want to share with you. And I know this person actually sent the question of Anne, so I did some research. Okay, back to you, Melinda.
Jim, your mic's open. You're next.
The other thing I think of is like your network is bigger than your network. It's just math. Your network is bigger than your network. And so I think in this case, what this question talked about is, you know, the foundation is stressed about the finances. The families with kidney disease are stressed about their finances. I think it's time to turn to that donor base that Pam mentioned and say, you know, this was going to make us what, 50,000, 200,000, whatever it was going to make us. And we need to get as close to that as we can. Can you take responsibility for selling a table? Even if we're not doing a virtual event, can you get 10 people to buy a $200 ticket? Can we get enough? Can we get 10 people to agree to each get 10 donors? Can you be responsible for raising $2,000 for us? So that kind of thing may turn into, you know, the sort of scale that you need, because I'm on a nonprofit board. We have some nonprofit clients. Everybody's big galas are canceled, and you know, trying different things, including going to the true believers and letting them spread the message, because they're going to know which of their friends is still in an okay position, and let them contact them for you.
And segmenting your audience. I mean, you're going to have you probably have already a tier of donors. You have your top tier and your middle tier and your bottom tier. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a more personal outreach too. It's thinking about, maybe it's not a mass outreach, but it's a personal appeal. to your most, your most vital and your most passionate. It's a combination of both resources and passion, and thinking about where is that sweet spot. And so maybe that circle starts small and then builds out over time. It's Jim's idea, but it's sort of, slicing down so that it's not mass, knowing that a lot of your community is probably deeply affected and focused on other things. Some of your donors may be sort of second degree removed, and they might have passion for what you do, but are not yet directly, I said infected, I apologize, affected, and would be interested.
And by all means, go back to your sponsors, the people who are spending 1,000, 3,000, whatever, and say, we really still need this money. Is it okay if we keep it? We've done that on one nonprofit I'm on, and to my knowledge, no sponsor has said anything, but it's fine. We understand, keep it. Now, if
And
it's
also,
a small restaurant, they might need the money back, but bigger companies may not.
And also, and tell them what you're going to do with it too. Sometimes the people know exactly, like for example, if it's masks for your community because they're immunocompromised, or if it's thermometers or whatever. I mean, I'm making this up, I apologize, but if it's a specific use of the funds, that's often very compelling too. So sorry, Tuck, you wanted to jump in. I'm the moderator, not the talker.
You had a great point there. I think two things that I just had some concepts on, and one of them is that there is a misconception that people aren't spending money right now. I think they're not spending money on some things, which means they likely have more money for other things. And so, while there are funds being diverted to that, and people are obviously having challenges with employment, for those that aren't, they're not able to go to the restaurant. They're not able to do the things. So thinking about that local spending is important. But to Jim's point earlier, right, like traffic on Facebook is up 70% in this window than they typically see. They're having trouble keeping the lights on, according to Mark Zuckerberg. And, I think thinking about the inventory opportunity there and how things are so cheap, to the point that you may be able to find new audience, the friends of friends right now, is actually a really good time to maybe think about your budget could go a lot further in finding new donors that may be more accessible and have the funds to use right now than you previously had before. I think one of the other things too that I think is really interesting as businesses are looking at shifting their product services model right now is thinking ahead. A lot of times we think events in the moment because we have to raise money at that event. A lot of restaurants, because they can't get people in right now, are thinking about things like subscription services. What could I buy ahead, right? For the next year, I'll give you X in exchange for dollars now. And sort of like the gift card model, collecting the dollars now for a future purchase. But maybe there's a way to innovate that for a nonprofit in terms of a donation for now. What do you get maybe later, right? Whether it's access to an exclusive situation or an event when you do come back online, whatever that is. I think there's opportunities to think ahead a little bit and change the dynamic of what your offering is. To your point, a fundraiser and an auction could be something that is 6 months from now with some guarantees included in that are maybe not situationally advantageous, because you can't have it in the moment.
Thank you, guys. So let's turn our attention to events specifically, because, and I think there's a nuance on events, so not just nonprofit events, but all events. And I think a lot of the questions center around, we don't know what's going to happen. Holy crap, I have an event that's going to go in July, or I have an event that's going to go in October. Do I keep messaging? What if it gets canceled? I'm stuck. I think there's several questions about this. For not yet canceled events, do we keep marketing? It doesn't get canceled, but it might get canceled. And I think, that's a pretty good way to sort of start talking about events now. Let's see, whose mic is open? Jim, your mic's open.
Yeah, I put it open and then I started to regret the decision.
Too late, no take-backs.
Well, one thing I was thinking about, like the July 2020 event, I'm not going to give a credit card for an event happening in July 2020 or August probably. What I might be willing to do is, a really honest landing page that says, if we do this, if we're able to do this, would you like to know about it? And give my email address saying, yes, if this event is on, put me on the whatever list for people who are interested if it's safe to do that. So that's part of it. And then, something like this that Brianna's kind enough to do for free for us, I could see by, fall, this being, a 2-day event that you have to pay $400 or $500 to attend, with different sessions coming off and on. So I would also be thinking about what if I can't? What if I saw one company saying they're just moving all their 2020 events. They're done. They're not even going to try. They're moving them all to 2021. All right. Well, you've got a fair amount of time. What can you build to try, now? So I think I would be collecting names and email addresses of interested people, and then to Tuck's point, thinking about my model, because there is some talk about us coming out of quarantine and then going back in and then coming out until we get enough herd immunity. So I would be thinking about those things.
I'm going to call on Brianna, she looks great. She was on video earlier, but she's got an events business. And I mean, Brianna, what are you thinking about? How are you proceeding?
I was hoping you guys would give me all the answers, but
we can.
I mean, for now, at the moment, I mean, yeah, we have our events that we've moved to August, and we have our large event at the end of the year in October in New York, which obviously we're keeping an eye on that with how things have progressed in that city there. But I mean, we're really shifting a lot of our strategy to virtual. And I think right now, I mean, or at least I'm trying to provide value where we can. I think now, with a lot of events, I know a lot of people can relate to this, that things are in limbo right now. And so I think my priority is just to be able to keep our database and our event attendees and past attendees engaged through a lot of the free content that we're putting out there, like these Ask Us Anything webinars, and probably thinking about bringing on some virtual options for our August event, or at least letting people know that that's an option that we're thinking about, like Jim. Talking about putting up a landing page saying, if you're interested in attending this virtually, we're putting together some options, please let us know if you're interested in attending this event virtually. So at least right now, it's really just keeping tabs on how things are developing. But I imagine that our virtual offerings are going to become a lot more robust, and hopefully, events are a really important place that people do business, and a lot of people rely on events to meet vendors and meet, business partners and make those connections. And so, we're kind of thinking of how we can serve those vendors too, and make sure that they have access to those attendees. So I imagine that they'll probably become a pretty big part of some of the virtual offerings that we're putting together later this year too. So, but for now, it's, also I imagine in the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to see a ton more virtual events. And so, a lot of competing voices there, obviously, but hopefully we can build a model out later this year that that can be half virtual and be able to transition completely virtual if we need to later this year. But yeah, it's I hate to say this, but there's so much up in the air right now, but yeah, just trying to provide value. I mean, that's where I'm at right now.
I think you're doing a really good job of doing something, again, that's sort of part of event work anyway, and that's creating community. And community can be created online just as much as it can be created virtually. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't know these 3 panelists before a week ago. And now I'm like, when am I going to meet them in person? I mean, I feel like I have 3 people I can now call on who are experts in this area and are giving expertise. And I think that's a powerful thing event organizers do. And we're starting to see that certainly in America, and I think we're seeing it around the world as more of a sense of collaboration and community, and we're in this together, and people looking for opportunities to connect. And so promoting events, I think, just sort of goes right into this idea of drawing people together around a hearth, for mutual benefit. So, I know Brianna was ahead of the curve. She was one of the first people out there. She was planning this 2 weeks ago, which is pretty amazing given how many webinars we're seeing now. So
yeah. One of my clients is putting on continuing education in the dental field, and they're absolutely sold out. It's all hygienists and most of the dentists are home, and hey, this is a good time to get some CE credits. So there is some value. Yeah,
that's awesome.
We have a giant insurance brokerage client, and they are doing massive webinars around COVID-19 with thousands of people attending, because businesses are at home and people want to understand risk. And if there's just appetite for it. Plus, I think people want to escape their children or their spouse. Boredom is setting in, and people have a lot more free time on their hands. And so how are they going to improve themselves, prove their professional knowledge? So think about how, again, back to what the panelists were saying about what you're doing for people, making it less about you. I mean, there's a certain amount of communication about what you are doing, what your organization is doing. You have to tell people, but at the same time, put it in terms like what's in it for them. What's in it for your audience? What are you doing to help them? That message, I think, never gets old. It never crosses the line. It never feels wrong when it's for them, when it's honestly. Am I wrong, panelists? Like, tell me if I'm
No, I think you're absolutely right, Melinda. And I think one thing that's super interesting, right, is like there's some things that can't be replaced about a physical event. And yet sometimes a physical event, there's almost this mass to it that's inaccessible. And, you know, going back to the points that we've all been talking about, one is about how you're delivering value in a different way, but then translating that to the intimacy of this type of environment. My face is probably really big on some people's screens right now, right? I'm just looking at Melinda and Pam and Jim and everybody else that I've been on Zoom or WebEx or whatever kind of conference calls, and they're, you know, 6 inches in front of my face at a massive size. And so I think there's a different type of intimacy, thinking about how you're delivering that value and creating new introductions, going back to the core of what do you actually do that event for? What do you actually do as a business, as a brand? What product and service, what value does that deliver to your consumer, and almost retranslating that to how do I solve for that in an all digital environment. Maybe it feels a little bit different because we can't touch it and we can't be there, but it's showing up in a different way, I think.
Yeah, going back to basics. Yep.
I would like to, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I mean, I can stay a few minutes after, but I don't know where the rest of the people are, but there's some great questions here. And I think this is an important one to talk about, which is for companies that have had to let people go. And I think the reason this is an important question is it's not just today, if we're being honest, right? Over the next 6 months, there will be many companies that are affected by layoffs. And the question is, how do we handle former employees slamming the company and leaving bad reviews or comments? Should we respond publicly? I want to expand that question a little bit. I want to take it a little bit broader, which is when your company has negative news, when your company has to do something that's not positive, right? That's not not exciting or happy to discuss. I would say, let's talk about how companies should deal with it overall, both from a brand perspective, as well as the specifics of responding on social media. Tuck, I'm going to start with you.
This is a struggle, right? And I think there's some very core and basic elements to PR that come into play here. But I think the number one thing that I'm seeing really positive response to, no matter what it is just ultimate transparency as much as possible. So for example, Time, came out, owned by the founder of Salesforce. They said, we're not doing layoffs for 90 days. That implies that there's uncertainty after 90 days, right? But for this window, they've given their employees and the rest of the world this confirmation that they're doing everything they can to defend the line. I think there's a number of businesses out there that are creating uncertainty from leadership by not providing as much transparency as they can about their situation. Those that are creating incredible loyalty on one side, and or giving that ability for their employees to react a different way, right? If you're going to be out of a job, let us know so we can go do something else. Hashtag now hiring on LinkedIn or whatever it is, so they can figure out what their next steps are. Again, it's a different type of environment, but I'm seeing something that is really, I think helpful for many people is over communicating, which is what we talked about before, and then ultimate transparency as much as you can in a realistic way that makes sense without obviously not affecting, your market position, the rest of that. But so it's helpful for your employees as well as your customers.
So, hey, Melinda, I want to address that very quickly. I want to talk about two things, and I agree with Tuck 100%, but I was in a big corporation for a long time, and in the B2B segment, also in the big corporation, they usually have a process they follow for a situation like this. And I do agree 100% from Tuck's perspective, this is a PI issues, and not every single company, I hate saying this, in reality can be 100% transparent. And that's just the harsh reality. And when there was one situation I want to share, an instance I want to share with you, it's not my client, it's not actually me specifically. Remember a couple of years ago, there is a huge PR fiasco, United Airlines, and one of the They actually get the police force to drag somebody out of the plane. Remember that? And that was a huge disaster. I mean, I'm sure, I am positive, so many United employees want to defend their company. They do, right? I'm actually a platinum member of United Airlines, right? I want to find out to the bottom of this. What's going on? My God, are they going to treat me like this? I'm a freaking Asian, right? So, but when I call United to book my flight, I'm not allowed to talk about it. I get on the airplane, I talk to a flying attendant. Hey, can you talk to me a little bit about that instance? Sorry, I'm not allowed to talk about it. So they are instructed by their PR, by their legal, by their internal team. They can't talk about it because of potential liability. I understand that we need to be 100% transparent, but in a big corporation, it's very, very hard. They have 200,000 people. They cannot control it, right? So they basically said, if you want to find out a little bit more, this is the address that you can go find out, right? So I hear you. And so on one hand, what I want to say is there is a process that the company follow for a situation like that. This is not something an individual like me, a social media manager, can literally address. I understand, because you might get slapped or you might get into trouble, right? So on one hand, I want to say follow the protocol, even though the protocol is something you disagree. Because when I was talking to the person on the phone when I booked the ticket, she was like, I'm mad because not everybody is like that. But she said that. Not every United employees are like that. We are not like that. But she said, I cannot talk about it. Same thing, I work in a big corporation for a long time. There's multiple disasters happen when I was 20 years, I was there. I was instructed not to talk about it. So one thing I want you to follow the protocol. The other thing is you can basically say, our company is not like that. Unfortunate instance, but it's not like that. Maybe that's one thing that you can do to actually address, to help. But on one, I just want to make sure I understand there's a harsh reality, and this applies to higher education, this applies to federal government, this also applies for big corporation. So I know it's not a very good answer. I apologize, but.
Yeah, this is one of those questions that's really hard, but I have to call you out, Jim, because one of the audience members called you out in a good way. It said, ask Jim this. Jim did a great job when Ignite had to eliminate some positions several years ago when they lost a really big client. He was transparent about it, offered to reimburse any company that hired one of the affected employees if they didn't work out. Now I can't wait to meet you more. So
yeah, we had to let go 50 people on one day, which was really the worst day of my career. And we're not a particularly large company. And one of the things we decided to do was give every employee a letter saying, if you hire this person and within the first year let them go for either performance or character issues, we'll pay your company $5,000. Because the only reason we let them go is because we lost a client. It has nothing to do with them. And we never paid $5,000. Everyone, 75% of people had jobs before the layoffs hit. 100% were hired within about, I think, 5 weeks after the layoffs were over. So, we just tried to, it was true. It wasn't their fault. And we had to convey that in some way. But as a social media geek, the specific question was, what about when people are saying the negative things? There's three things. One, are they right? Did you do the wrong thing? Should you apologize? Two, you're not the only one. If you haven't seen the unemployment numbers, they're staggering right now and they're going to get worse. And I think most people understand that. Three, if it's on Facebook, you can let it go, or you can hide the comment. And if you do that, the commenter will see it and their friends will see it, but the rest of the public won't see it. Not a best practice to do routinely, but in certain situations, rarely used, it's okay. And then if it's on Glassdoor, that is gonna last and people will read that. You should definitely respond to that. Even something as simple as, it's a hugely difficult time in the middle of this COVID-19 program. We exhausted every option before we resorted to layoffs or furloughs. Just so when a year from now, someone's on Glassdoor to see you're a human being and you felt bad about this, I think is the way to go.
And in fact,
Yeah.
we will come out of this.
We will.
It may be a year, it may be 2 years, but if you are a large enough company, you will be around and people will look to see how you handle these situations. So the
Yes,
first
brands are
advice is
being
to,
made and damaged right now.
that's right. So do the right, if you're the social media manager, you probably don't have much control over that decision. But if you are a leader in your company doing the right thing from the beginning, even there are going to be people who are going to be mad about this because this is painful and difficult no matter what. At the same time, if you are doing the right thing, if you're doing a careful thing, if you're doing a human and thoughtful, doing it in a thoughtful way that humanizes people, you will be able to recover. So it's sort of starting from the beginning. But yeah, so we have only a few minutes left, and I think it's a good time to ask this question, which is what happens after all of this? And I think there's a lot of questions of like, how do we start to prepare now? So we survive the crisis. Let's assume we survive the next 12 to 18 months or longer that it takes to bring us through this as a planet, really. How can marketers now start to prepare for that world, and how do they think about setting direction and making decisions now that will put them in good stead? All three of the mics are open, so it's the last question, so I think we should go around the room. Tuck, I haven't heard from you in a while. I think I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what's happening next. And I think that's the biggest question mark. There's no playbook that defines what we're going through right now. I think we're all reacting as much as we're trying to be proactive, like we talked about leadership stepping in and taking, that. But I think, again, if our goal is to act as humans and be a human as a brand, acting in this space and helping support consumers, I think business is going to radically change. I think a lot more is going digital, as we're talking about through this. I think a lot more businesses are going to be planned to have the ones that, candidly survive, because they're ones that will not. There'll be some consolidation. There'll be some, people going out, unfortunately, just because this is a struggle and it's real.
Totally agree.
But I think the landscape is going to change radically. I think on the positive side, people are going to appreciate each other, and the brands that stepped up, those consumers will be more loyal than ever. And I think, once we get into a window where people feel comfortable about stepping out again, there will be this rush back, because I know all of us are pent up saying, man, I just want to sit on a patio and have a margarita with like 3 people that I haven't seen on webcam in the last 3 weeks. Right. So I think there's just, there's some realities that are going to go back to normal. I think there's going to be the loss of the handshake. I think there's going to be an ongoing halo of people being very sensitive to what they touch going forward. And that that community will be redefined in so many ways, a lot of it being more digital, which is why it's a great time to engage on social, because that's going to be probably a foundational element of every business going forward.
Very good. Jim, you want to go next?
Pam, you want to go next, and then we'll finish with Jim.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, that's actually good. I agree with everything Tuck said. There's a couple things. I am a process type of gal, and when I was working at Intel, there's a lot of things that we have to set up actually for the process and to move the whole organization forward, especially when you actually have to work with geography, geo-marketing, you have to work with country marketing, you have to work with business units, you have to work with the multiple different marketing functions. And so from process perspective, this is what I would suggest. If you actually have a team, maybe you should start having a conversation as a part of your, say, weekly meeting, and then talking about, say, all right, when the situation recover, now the restriction is lifted. What are the possible scenarios that will happen? What is scenario number 1? Will people, will rush out, start buying? Or people will just recover very, very slowly because many people are out of a job. Or third situation is people are not doing anything, right? So you should have a team meeting and make that a weekly agenda and start talking about it, right? Because if you work in a team, that for team to react faster, like a situation like this, it's talk about it, right? Proactively talk about it and make that agenda as a part of your weekly meeting. And list it as a possible scenario. What are the couple scenarios that might happen? And if we are in these scenarios, these are the couple things we can do. So you proactively address some of the issues that we talked earlier at this call. We are stuck. Maybe that proactive communication will help us to unstuck, or at least drive a little conversation moving forward. So back to you.
Jim.
Well, social media marketing operates at the intersection of technology and psychology, and I think we have to consider both of those. Psychologically, I think as early as next week, we're going to be starting to crave normalcy, and that feeling is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, assuming we're not sick or someone in our family is not sick. And so I don't think we're thinking about 12 months from now. I think we're thinking about 2 weeks from now and being ready to at least put our toe in the water. I saw a survey, 48% of brands are planning to spend more on Facebook, 21% are planning to spend less, the rest are planning to spend the same amount. So people are about to start coming out to test the waters again with their stuff. There was a question on paid and organic that we didn't get to. Both paid efficiency is up and organic reach is up for both brands and influencers. So this is a good time to reach people when they're stuck on their devices. So I really think continuing to be sensitive, but beginning to think, okay, we took a pause, we brought a bunch of stuff down, we shut off our ad spend, we went dark. We got to come out of this a little bit gently, accurately, adeptly, but we got to begin to come out of it, and more so in the next week, 2 weeks, month, 2 months than in 6 months.
It's a good summary. I was just reading there was an HBR piece that looked at companies who survived recessions. They looked at post 9/11, post 2008, post oil crisis, and what they had in common, the most successful firms, were not that they cut to the bone and not that they spent like there was no tomorrow. It was a balanced approach, and that's worth thinking about. So you have to, it's sort of a fun and interesting time if you can get your head to that place to think about what are we doing this week, next week, and then what are we doing a couple of months from now is I think kind of the next time frame. And then it's, post recovery. But since we don't know what post recovery looks like, it's almost too soon. So the idea is, what are we doing now that will not stand in our way a year from now? In finance, we call this optionality. How do you preserve the option for the things that comes next? As you make choices today, think about them in terms of not closing down your options a year from now. So with that, I will ask our panelists if they have any last thoughts. Pam first, and then we'll sign off.
Well, hang in there. Marketing is not going to get a lot easier, and you have to be on your feet and be flexible and nimble and adaptive. And it's actually hard. So drink a lot.
A lot of water.
Drink a lot of tea.
Stay hydrated. I would just say, if I didn't get to a question, if I can be of help, I'm Jay Tobin on Twitter, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll happily, what the hell else do I have to do? I'll happily try and answer these questions.
I think all of us would say that, right? We're all, probably all four of us, we're talking about, we field calls from our networks, outside our networks. Call upon us. That's what we're there for, to answer questions and talk you through it. So, Tuck?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm at Tuck Ross on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions as well. I think, like we've talked about, so much more is going digital. There's a ton of opportunities because things are on sale right now if you have the capability to do that. If not, look at reducing your costs. Look at, how do you get through any type of situation, because we don't know how long it's going to last. Push those things out that are non-critical. And I think ultimately for marketing, it's us connecting as people. Your consumer, whether it's B2C or B2B, your consumer is the hero. How do you act as a human in this space? How do you be consistent? How do you engage and redefine ultimately what value you're delivering, with the core of your brand still coming through, but becoming more as a platform for people?
Well stated.
Well done.
Brianna, thank you. So I will turn this over to Brianna to take us home. Thanks to the panelists. This has been a blast. It's been fun to focus on something other than talking to my husband.
Thank you,
Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for, obviously the attendees that joined us today, some really great conversations and questions. And of course our panelists too, just being so open. I emailed them and said, hey, how do you guys feel about hopping on a webinar that's, open to any sort of question about marketing? So thank you very much for being so open and awesome and providing some great insights. So we have another one in 2 weeks on April 15th. So I'll post some information about that soon. And we're also going to be sharing the recording from this with everyone. And I know, Pam, you were taking some notes on some questions, and I know—
Yes, I did.
All of them have mentioned they're open to connecting with all of you, and we'll try to get some of the other questions that, if there's ones we didn't touch on, we'll post about those on social, or find some way to get some answers to you guys. So thank you to everyone who joined us today, and hope to see you at the next one. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.